Hi everyone, my name is Claire Brown. I am the Senior Campaign Manager here at Birchal, the equity crowdfunding platform that allows everyday investors to invest in the brands they love. And I am delighted today to be joined by Andrew Perry, the CEO of PREPD Hydration.
Hey Claire, good to be here. Nice to be back.
Great to have you back. Oh, here's Tim now. Hello. So as the first order of business, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we are gathering to have this webinar today. So I'm based in Melbourne, which is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I know that both Andrew and Tim are joining us from different parts of Australia as well. So Tim, whereabouts are you based?
I'm in Lennox Head. So northern New South Wales, enjoying some humid, hot weather.
Fantastic. And Andrew?
I'm from Adelaide, or based in Adelaide at the moment, Claire. Yes, so not sure what it's like outside Reedy today. I haven't been outside much.
Amazing. Well, for everyone's understanding, how we're going to run through the webinar today is I'm going to very shortly pass it over to Andrew and Tim to introduce themselves, and we're going to bring up a very short sort of 10 to 20 minute presentation that Andrew prepared on the PREPD Hydration brand and where you're looking to go with this capital raise. You will find throughout this webinar that there is a Q&A function down the bottom of your screen. So if you have a question, please pop it in the Q&A chat bot for us to address at the end of the presentation. And you will be able to see the questions that other people have asked. So if you can see a question and you'd really like that to be answered, please upvote the question or make a comment on the question as well. But I might hand over to Andrew and Tim to introduce themselves and their role at PREPD, and then we can get, started on the prezo.
Delivery, Tim?
Yeah, well, sorry about that. I thought it might be something more important, but anyway.
Look, my name's Andrew Perry. I'm the CEO and lucky enough to be the CEO of PREPD Hydration. We are a company that is certainly changing the way that athletes and everyday people hydrate before and after exercise. We've come back to Birchal for a second capital raise. The first one was a lot of fun, and we brought in a lot of passionate people that were, first of all, customers more than most, and then became investors in the brand. And so that journey with those people over the last 18 months has been really enjoyable, and we've kept them up to date with everything we've been doing and the results we've been able to achieve, albeit in a challenging environment, but it's been a lot of fun. So we're back again and happy to be partnering with Birchal again. But what I would like to do is introduce one of our brand ambassadors who has been with us pretty well since day dot. 2016 Ironman world champ. So he is well versed in the world of hydration and the importance it plays for him as an athlete, but also for the everyday person. So Reedy, I'll throw to you if you want to just give a little overview of who you are, what you've done.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, so I've been a professional athlete for much longer than I ever expected. Started off as like a 1-year sabbatical from work, and it's ended up, I'm 12 years in now, and slowly trying to wean my way off it, but I'm still got that competitive itch. So still racing at a pretty high level while managing a few other roles. But yeah, PREPD was something that when it was launching, I actually got in touch with the brand early on and asked if I could try some. And I've always been very technically minded and very analytical, probably overly so. Sometimes it's a good thing, and sometimes you just need to simplify and race. But I started testing PREPD in my when I first received it, and I was like, I love to do threshold testing on the bike, where it's just set heart rate and see what power I'm getting at 10-minute efforts at the same temperature, same humidity. And that's the way I really measure my threshold throughout the year, instead of a VO2 max test, which I think there's a lot more external factors that can get in the way. So to simplify, what I found was I was just sort of amazed at how the effect that I got from PREPD, the way I could do these sub-threshold tests at the end of big days of training, and I was so much better hydrated that I could put out much better power output at a lower heart rate. And so instantly I was on board, and I drove a pretty hard bargain actually with PREPD, because I said, look, I'm going to use this product no matter what. And I'm going to need some money because I don't want my competitors to use it to promote it, So it was one of those rare things that you find that I was really stoked to come across, and almost disappointed to have to share the good news to my fellow competitors.
Reedy, it's a good point you make, and I know you and I have spoken about that a fair bit, and we joke about it, that you didn't want to share it with anyone else. So in terms of, just for the audience, some of the people on the Zoom call here today, just dipping their toe in, finding out some information, interested in investing in the brand. If you just go back a step, so when you were doing that testing and you were, your sub-max tests on the bike, and just what sort of things did you see in your heart rate and the benefits you saw that then you're able to take out onto the training track and then into races?
So the biggest thing, first of all, just directly with the testing is, normally with training, whenever I do a sub-threshold test at the end of a big training day, your heart rate is so much higher because your blood is thicker because you're just not as well hydrated. So the heart's working a lot harder to move the blood around. And so what I was finding was I could do these big training days and I was getting the same sub-threshold test results as when I hadn't done the big training days. So I was obviously staying better hydrated throughout these sessions. And no matter how much you drink throughout a session, especially up here in northern New South Wales through summer, it's very difficult to replace what you're losing. And so you always finish the day a bit dehydrated. And so the other big thing that I noticed that was a little bit more subjective was how much better I was sleeping at night, because I wasn't going to bed again with that higher heart rate, blood a little thicker, body's working hard just to do its normal repair processes because my blood volume's down. So that was, for me, the biggest advantage I found was the way I could back up day in, day out training, because I was getting better sleep. And Andrew, as well as anyone that I'm quite an insomniac at the best of times. And so to suddenly do these training blocks where I wasn't awake all night, with dehydration and that cortisol effect that comes on with stressing out your body with so much training, it was a real game changer for me. And, something that I was, certainly all the athletes I've coached too, it's just become a standard part of my protocol and theirs.
So you lead me into the next question. So you coach, so you're obviously, you're performing at an elite level. And for the people on this call, Tim and I will normally have conversations and he'll start telling you about times that he's running and how he's feeling and those sorts of things. And my response to him is, this phone call is going to end really quickly if you keep teasing me with those sorts of results. Now, nevertheless, it never does end, and we do have great conversations. But I think that the key point there is, Reedy, you operate at a level that most people can never get close to. For the average person, for someone that comes to Reed Performance Group that wants to be coached in triathlon, they're a middle-aged man like myself, a couple of kids, work a full-time job, and then trying to squeeze in triathlon around it. What sort of effects are you seeing on your people that you're coaching?
So obviously the perks don't necessarily result in big prize checks like professional athletes get, but the benefits are pretty much exactly the same. Not even from a morning session, my amateur athletes, if they've trained too hard and they go to work dehydrated, they're zombies at work. They're not very productive. And so that's why I'm encouraging them. It's not so much about, for a lot of these athletes, they don't care if they finish 20th in their age group or 30th. They just want to enjoy their physical training and not feel like they want to feel like it's benefiting the rest of their life, not hurting the rest of their life. And so that's why I really push it on all the athletes I coach, from the professionals right down to, right across to amateur athletes that are just doing it to stay fit and healthy, is, you need exercise to work with your life. It shouldn't ruin your work life and your family life because you're exhausted and not recovering well.
And I know you're very busy with some young kids that run around and keep you on your toes. Do you, so as a professional athlete that's operating at a much higher level, is that what you're seeing as well? You've got more time, energy and effort with the kids and the like when you finish the big training session? Yeah,
I think I get to see the benefits that I want from the amateur athletes, because I'm living much of the same life, managing 3 kids, my wife works, and then also from the professional side, in that, you do perform better, you race better, you get paid better. So certainly for me, getting home from sessions when you're wiped out, and I would easily lose 5 kilos with a hard training session in summer up here. So I'd start the day at 67. I could be as low as 61, 62 by the end of the day. And there's no way you can function as a productive human, whether it be playing with your kids or getting work done, with that level of dehydration. So I had to mitigate the losses, and and that's where I found with Prepped, I could limit those losses to just a couple of kilos, rehydrate by the time I go to bed and sleep, and just back up day after day.
Perfect. We'll come back. We might jump into the presentation now, but really insightful and really valuable, Reedy, about that. We'll jump into the presentation, but then what we'll do, Reedy, is we'll come back and talk just about your experience in the US and what you see for the triathlon market in the US as well. So Claire, as we've said here, Prepped, it's made for performance, and whether that's performance as a husband or a wife, looking after kids, running a family after training for things that you're passionate about, or whether that's being able to turn up to work and do it because you've been training as well. It could be for performance at work because you're a tradie and you're working outside in hot, humid environments as well. Just recently, I actually was lucky enough to go to a mate's place, and I took our young boys up that are almost 13 and just turned 11, and took them, and they worked in a shearing shed for the day. And we gave some prep to some of the shearers, and the shearers said to me on that day in the rouseabout, said, people often tell us that whilst we aren't physically running a marathon, we are doing the effects of running a marathon from being on the boards all day, every day in a shearing shed. So they, again, just another market that loved the product and found it really enjoyable. So Claire, if we go to the next slide. As Tim was just saying, then the problem that we have is the moment we lose 2% of our body weight, it really impacts on our ability to perform. And we're talking in an athletic setting right here, but it does reduce our performance by somewhere between 5 to 30%. So I think when people get dehydrated, performance goes out the window really quickly, and they fall off a cliff. And it's just hard to rehydrate once you're dehydrated. So I guess the prevention is something that you can control if you keep the fluids in, and Prep certainly allows that to happen. The shortcoming in most sports drinks is that they're just too high in sugar. A Prepped Recover or a Prep Prime has about half a teaspoon of sugar in it. A Powerade or a Gatorade have about 16 teaspoons of sugar in them. So effectively, they're just sugary drinks. Now, look, they do certainly play a role in terms of what you need to optimize your performance. But what we're saying is that you probably don't need that much sugar in the product to be able to absorb it. And the small intestine will only absorb about 5 grams of sugar per litre anyway. So we are just saying that we're a different option to that, and we can help facilitate better hydration because they're lower in sugar. So we're backed by over 20 years of medical science, and the original science came from, and just quickly, the original science came from some research into helping men and colon cancers, to be perfectly honest, and looking at ways to drop the pH level in your colon. And the lower the pH level in your colon, the less likely it is for cancer or bacteria that cause cancer to grow. That was the original science. They then took that science and looked at how they can increase fluid absorption in the large bowel, and that was through the optimized resistant starch that we use. And so then all we've done is we've just taken that science, combined it together, and put it into a sports drink, which allows you to absorb up to 5 litres of fluid from your large bowel that, unless the resistant starch hits there, it doesn't happen, and we just pass those fluids in our everyday life. So this is probably a really quick overview of how it works. So the fluid comes into our stomach, goes through, it's broken down into glucose, which promotes water and fluid absorption or salt absorption in the small intestine. But as I said earlier, at about 5 grams of sugar per litre is where it is optimized. Those sports drinks we just spoke about before, they sit around that 60 grams per litre. So the body's got to try and get rid of 55 grams per litre of sugar before it can actually use the fluid that you're pulling in. What then happens is the resistant starch, or the red dots, which is where our science is founded on, resistant to being broken down through the stomach and small intestine, gets into the large intestine, and the chemical reaction that happens then is the short chain fatty acids are built or released, And those short chain fatty acids just trigger to the brain to say, hey, look, there's some more fluid here in your large bowel that can be brought back in, and keep our blood hydrated. So what Tim was saying earlier is it keeps your blood thinner. The thinner your blood, the easier it is for that blood to be pumped around your body. So therefore your heart rate will generally be lower. And if your heart rate's lower, your sweat rate will be lower, because your sweat rate is what keeps you cool when you're exercising. So that's just a quick overview of how the background of the science works. The science comes from some, pretty high pedigree. It's fundamentally from here in Adelaide at Flinders University, and also over in America at Yale Uni. They're the two universities that founded the science. They're still very much involved in what we do today. And I did get a message from Professor Henry Binder, who is one of our colleagues over in Yale, over in the US at Yale, and said he might be able to drop in today. So hopefully you're online, Henry. Great to have your support. The other great thing that our product does is it's a prebiotic. So it's feeding good food to the good bacteria in your gut, which means you've got a healthier gut. Now, depending on where you get your information from, around about 70% of all the body, all the bacteria that makes up our immune system sits in our gut. So if you've got a healthy gut, you're a healthy person. So in this setting, in this athletic setting that we're talking about, if you're out and about, and you're exercising, and Reedy, I know athletes are always pushing the limits, but you would always be on the verge of feeling ill or getting a cold or something like that. Is that what you find?
Oh, absolutely. It's no secret that athletes are actually, ironically, get more sick than the average person. Every time you do a very hard session, your immune system is suppressed for 48 hours. So we live in constant immune suppression. So getting that gut health right is obviously a hugely important thing, and something I've had to work on. Even outside of prep, I've had to eliminate a lot of foods and work out what works for me in terms of gut health to be able to get through big training blocks without getting sick.
Yeah, and so whilst we're supporting the hydration needs of athletes, we're also improving their gut health. And the results from the trial that they did with the World Health Organization in the south of India, where children were losing up to 10 litres of fluid a day, they saw that these children started absorbing fluids about 39% more efficiently. So put a massive line through, mortality rates in the south of India for the children. And then all we've been able to do is use that science, turn it into a sports drink, and here we are. So the main study that we did a study with the Adelaide Football Club. And I guess all it shows is that thick black line is the players that were using PrEP. The lighter grey line, or the line on the bottom, was with the players that weren't using PrEP. So what we see is at the start of training, so at the top left of your screen, you've got a 0 value there. They're the players that they turn up the training. That was their baseline body weight. The players that were using PrEP presented a little bit heavier. The players that weren't using PrEP, on average across a 2-hour training session throughout the study, lost about 1.6 kilos of fluid or body weight over that period. The players using PrEP only lost 1.2 kilos. But where that rehydration, and Tim spoke about it earlier, that rehydration is really important in allowing athletes to bounce back. And so the athletes that weren't using PrEP gained about half the body weight loss post 2 hours of exercise. So they got back to, still down about 800 grams on where they were when they presented to training, where the players that were using PrEP were back to within 120 grams of where they were at training. So that ability to rehydrate, get back and go again, there's no other product out there on the market that is doing that from a hydration perspective. So I guess just a little overview of how we've been building our brand over the last couple of years. So if you just go to the next slide there, Claire. We've brought on a whole host of new ambassadors, and one of them is Izzy Batdor, who is here based in Adelaide, and Izzy ran in Tokyo 5,000 meters and did a fantastic job. And she just talks about her ability to back up and perform and know that hydration is not going to be an issue that stops her achieving the goal that she wants to achieve. So we've brought on a number of different ambassadors. we've been to a whole host of different running events. And so I guess it's just showing whether people are, this is getting to the grassroots community and people that love running events. And so, the Ultra Trail Australia, which is a 100K run up in the Blue Mountains at Katoomba, was a fantastic event to go to. We're the naming rights sponsor of the Adelaide Marathon. And, certainly those sorts of events are a key pillar for our ability to get the product into people's hands. Triathlon events, so Reedy, in your space, and certainly the amount of people I speak to that say, oh yeah, I first saw you at Ironman Cairns, or I've seen Tim Reed use it. If it's good enough for Reedy, it's good enough for me. But that triathlon space has been really strong for us. And as we move out of COVID, it'd be really good to get back into that space here, but particularly into the US. And we'll get Tim to talk about that a little bit later on in the presentation. Cycling events have been huge for us as well. We've partnered up with Oliver's Real Food Racing Team, or a national level racing team here in Australia that also are a UCI or continental UCI team. So they go and race in Asia as well. And the boys that are on that side will constantly say exactly what Tim was saying earlier. Their ability to back up stage after stage after stage has certainly improved since they've been using PREPD. In terms of professional partnerships, these are a host of people that use our product throughout the last 12 months. And it's really good to be partnered with these guys. Whilst when we talk in the AFL space and also in the Cricket Australia space, Gatorade have that lockdown, or Gatorade and Powerade have those two sports locked down. So we can't do anything from an advertising point of view or anything like that. We've spoken to a couple of the cricketers from Cricket Australia in terms of whether they can do something, and they're not allowed to endorse any other product that would be deemed to be in competition with their major sponsor at this point in time until after they retire. So we can't do anything in that space, but what we do is we know that the players that use it love it. And so we can present it in this fashion here. And we'll keep working through avenues there to try and get more sporting teams on board. Those that are trialling it this pre-season, just jump across to the next slide there, Claire. North Melbourne, Richmond Footy Club. So the Geelong dietitian moved to Richmond, so we've been able to get in there. And then there's a new dietitian at St Kilda, so they're trialling as well. And then the bottom right is the Yale Bulldogs. So we're talking with the athletic department over at Yale Uni about using their science for their athletic program over there, which will be great. And then that will hopefully open up opportunities for us to go to other colleges in the university space over there in the States. These are our top flight brand ambassadors. So we were lucky enough in November last year to partner up with Michelle Jenica. So Michelle, while she's got 500,000 people that follow her on Instagram, she's got 1.1 that follow her on Facebook. And all our partnerships, and Reedy, you might want to jump in here too, but all our partnerships have been based on authenticity. One of the key pillars that we talk about here is it's got to be authentic and it's got to be real. And if you want to partner with us, you need to be able to promote the product, in an authentic way. We don't want it to look like a paid partnership or anything like that. And so, I guess that's been the thing that we talk about with our ambassadors is it should be easy for you to post about it or talk about PREP because it's making such a big difference to what you do day to day. How do you go with that, Reedy?
Yeah, I think so. I think, especially, I know for most of the athletes, PREP's not in a position to be throwing around $1 million deals. And so a part of it for me was I really believed in the brand and the product. And, so especially, at the time of signing when, I was coming off World Championship and a few other good results. And so you do get to be a bit more choosy at the time. And for me, it was about supporting a product that I genuinely believed in. I sort of stuck pretty true to that with most of the sponsors I've gone in the back half of my career. I think the first half you're just looking to pay some bills, but the second half you can be a bit more choosy. And I know most of the people on this list, and there's no one there who's doing it just for the cash. It's definitely a genuine belief in the product that makes the difference in getting people on board.
And I think the thing to that, Reedy, the other thing that we see, we talk as an internal team about being, a bit of a community and being really supportive. And so when Tim has a good result at a triathlon, you'll see Michelle or Izzy or Steve or Caitlin or whoever, they'll give Tim a thumbs up or make a comment on his posts, and vice versa. So I guess we're just trying to be much more than a brand that has ambassadors. We want to really create that community or that family feel, that people belong to something, and that seems to be working really well. I guess building a brand with everyday athlete reviews is, here's a guy that we reached out to after he first heard about us in the Strava challenge that we did in the US back in November last year. And he just came back and said he, again, saw an instant improvement in his energy levels and how he felt. And so whilst we've been receiving those sorts of endorsements regularly throughout Australia, it was nice to start to see that it's exactly the same for people from the US. And so these are the sorts of things that come in regularly. And we received another one yesterday from someone that was spruiking about Prep, who again was a part of that Strava challenge in the US, but it was talking to her triathlon club on a WhatsApp group. And the triathlon club just happens to be in Silicon Valley. So hopefully there's some good fruit to be bared from that. This is just another athlete review, and it just talks about, we see a lot of people just have a PB or allow them to achieve that lifelong goal that they've been chasing, and so some of these people that are doing Ironman events, they're out there. Reedy might be out there for 7.5 hours or 7 3/4 hours or something like that, but some of these people, they're out there for 10, 12, 13 hours to do an Ironman event. So they see that Prep underpins their hydration strategy for that event, which is really, really important. So this is the Australian Strava challenge we did. We saw almost 800,000 hours of exercise clocked over a 2-week period here in Australia back in January last year. And we took the learnings of that and thought, well, let's see what we can do if we put a challenge in the US. Now, when we did the US challenge, we only targeted runners. We didn't do cyclists or anything else. So if you go to the next slide, Claire, we, over the course of a month, only targeting runners in the end of October to the middle of November, the 3rd week of November, late last year, we clocked 2.5 million hours of exercise. So Strava is a really cool platform for us to engage with. It's a virtual locker room. It allows people to comment on people's runs or rides or whatever it is. And it certainly allows us to get in front of people, particularly through the COVID period where a lot of events that were cancelled and so we couldn't get to them. It certainly allows us to get in front of people really, really quickly or really easily and engage with them. We had good engagement through both challenges, and it's certainly something that sits on our horizon for what we want to do post this capital raise, is to really nail down and do a couple more in the US particularly, and build our brand over there. So the market opportunity is huge, and the global sports nutrition market is worth, it's about 228 billion. We're only after a small percentage of that. We know that if there's about 3.5 million Australians that exercise for more than 3 hours a week, of which, Tim falls into, and Amber, who's on the picture there, and those sorts of things. So if every one of those, well, 1% of those people, 35,000, use Prep twice a week, that would give us revenue of around about $18 million Australian. If we map that across the US, well, it just jumps to about a $300 million business. So we know the US is a big place, it's a big market. And I guess this is probably a really good time to segue back to you, Tim, just to talk about, you've spent a lot of time in the US racing. You understand the triathlon market really, really well over there. So what do you see, and what would you say to people that are considering investing in this opportunity, given that we really want to use the vast majority of the funds we raise here to launch ourselves into the US?
I think the biggest thing about the US is there is still, while we have a lot of similarities, there is a big cultural difference in the US in that I feel like athletes, particularly the triathletes I've had, that I've encountered, which would be thousands over the last 10 years, they're very willing to spend to get better performance. I think there's a little bit more, slightly more hesitation in Australia compared to the US, but if there's an easier way to do things and potentially not train quite as hard, then I think Americans have definitely sold on the idea. They're more open-minded to new technology, new products. And obviously, just the sheer number of athletes is massive, and so just that alone you capture a small portion of the market over there. And I always say to the athletes I work with that PrEP really is in its own category in terms of what it offers. There's no other pre or post hydration drink that works on a prebiotic going into your gut to help absorption of fluids. So if that key difference is really identified, I feel like, sure, you're never going to take down the sports hydration world, but you're not really trying to. You're trying to make people realize that PrEP works with that other hydration products like the Gatorade, like the Powerade, as sugary and as rubbishy as they are. The whole point of PrEP is to make them absorbed better during the session, during the race. And so you're really not trying to knock other competitors out of the market over there. You're trying to establish your own market of using it in conjunction with whatever other hydration products people use. And everything, like I've seen trends just take off in the US. When it comes to equipment that people use in triathlon, you go to the US, and what starts off as a different type of aero bar or a different type of hydration system one year, especially in races like Kona, Hawaii, the Ironman World Championships, you go the next year, suddenly 80% of the field has that equipment. So it's people are very open-minded, and if there's a way to get faster with doing slightly less work, which in my mind is how every athlete should train, you should do as little as you should to get maximum performance. There's no point doing more for worse performance. Then I think the US really excites me personally, and for PrEP, and I'm very excited to see how it goes, and I think it's going to be a real success over there.
Thank you, Reddy. Well, that's the slideshow. Claire, back to you for questions, I guess, that you wanted to run past us as well.
Yeah, well, I'm noting that we're just over 1 o'clock and we've got about 25 minutes left for today's session. So I'm really keen to maybe do a few questions from the audience, and then I can hop into some of the questions I have for the team as well. So I might run through the first 3 questions we've got coming through and then hop to some of the questions I have for you both. The first question is directed at you, Andrew. On the rehydration of the Adelaide Football Club study, where the control group and the PrEP group consume the same fluid and food types and volumes post-workout?
Good question. And it's a question we get from the dietitians all the time. So it was controlled as best as it could in what we would call a real world study. So in terms of what they consumed during the session, there was no real control over that. But I guess what we did do is try and, control it as best we could to get the results. I guess when we're taking the average over 54 players, because there was 27 that did it and 27 that didn't, the numbers still stacked up to be, quite a significant difference between those players that did use PrEP versus the ones that didn't.
And maybe a question for both of you as well. Have the pro athletes invested their own dollars into PrEP, or do they get sponsored with the product / money? So all those amazing ambassadors that we see for the brand, what is their involvement in the business? Because we mentioned that, PrEP's probably not in a position to be throwing out $1 million checks and sponsorships. So how does that relationship work, if you have it?
I guess I can only really speak for myself, but I've always chosen the path of investment over just straight up cash, because I could see the potential of this product, and I know a few other athletes have definitely gone the same path, but I can't speak for everyone. Andrew, I'll leave that to you.
No, look, vast majority of the athletes, they've got some investment in the business, and so they want to make sure that the business works, and Tim's one of those. The others that don't, more often than not, it's an in-kind relationship with them where they get product and they promote. But if we go back to the pillar of authenticity, we've had a number of people contact us that want to partake in being a part of the PrEP brand, for lack of a better phrase. And it always comes back to that not everyone can authentic. Well, I guess it just shows when they're not trying to be authentic, or they can't be authentic. It just doesn't work. And so we have a step process to become an ambassador. You don't just ring up and say, hey, I want to be an ambassador, and bang, they're on. So the guys that we do have, it's almost like a recruitment process. They want to work with us, we want to work with them, and away we go. But there's only a couple on the list that are paid. The rest do it for in kind, and all they've got shares within the business.
And a question's come through about your competitors. So if Gatorade and Powerade aren't the competitors for PREPD, then who do you consider your competitors to be?
It's a great question. Look, there's no one in the market, as Tim said before, there's no one in the market doing the bookends. So there's a fair bit of competition in terms of recovery, but that recovery space, but no one's using a resistant starch in a drink that allows reabsorption to happen faster or rehydration to happen faster. And there's no one over at this end, at the front end, saying to Tim, hey, before you go and do your Ironman event, or before you go for a big training session, consume something, somewhere 12 to 18 hours before your event or a training session. So there's no one doing that. So there is a blue ocean, so to speak, for opportunity. And I guess part of our communication to the market is we're not trying to take anything away from anyone. We're just trying to be a value add. And whether it's a Morton product, or whether it's an SOS, or whoever it is, we're just going to make that product work. Because if people can think back to that slide that we had up before about the stomach, anything that goes in there does get absorbed back into the bloodstream in some way, shape, or form. The PREP product's just going to make that happen about 40% more efficiently.
And before we hop more into, there's a few questions coming through about the strategy and the expansion, and a few more questions about the crowdfund itself and benefits to investors. I am keen to sort of actually take a few steps back and hear a bit more about, the revenue and the sales of PREPD, because we've heard on a high level, because we've heard about some fantastic ambassadors, some amazing events and brand partnerships that PREPD has been working on with the product. How has that actually translated into the market? And have you seen much growth in the product? And what have been some key inflection points for you in terms of growth?
Yeah, so look, if we look at the last 2 years, when our strategy to market was always to go to events and turn up where Tim's racing or cyclists are racing and those sorts of things, and they've all been cancelled. So that has certainly been a challenge for us, but it's made us pivot and look at places like mining, which we've spoken about with, we've got some positive results coming out of a trial we did with Rio Tinto. And it certainly made us talk more about the prebiotic space. It's allowed us to look at different distribution channels, being convenience stores and those sorts of things. But so our sales year on year, if we go January to December 20 versus 2021, sales are up about 15%, or revenue's up 15%, but our online sales are up 60% year on year. So we're seeing good growth there. And I guess the other thing that we're seeing in terms of those inflection points, whilst it's not translating to revenue at this point in time, we are seeing huge volumes of people coming to our website from the US. So the audience in the US, we would made up about 11% of our traffic last in 2020. It's made up about 24% of our traffic in the last 12 months. But the vast majority of that has come in the last 3 months since we've did the Strava challenge over in the US. So we're certainly seeing a big increase in audience from the US because of the Strava challenge.
And as I'm going through these questions, for everyone attending today's webinar, please, you'll be able to see the questions in our Q&A box. If there's anything you'd really like answered, you'll see a little like button and you can upvote the questions you'd like answered as well. I'm seeing a few come into here. And, with such great growth, back to you, Andrew and Tim, in the product, and seeing that it is, picking up speed, especially as you mentioned in the US, really interested to know a little bit more about, the protection around PrEP. So what is stopping other competitors picking up this science once it really takes off in other markets and basically crowding you out?
Yeah, so we've got a patent on the product or on the formulation. So that's been granted here in Australia and New Zealand. It's granted in the US, and we're just waiting for our European patent to come through. And that patent runs through until November 2034. So we've got first to market, we've got a strong hold there in terms of how that works and that technology. So we're really confident around our IP and the protections we have there.
Awesome. So the next question that's come through, and this relates to the crowdfund itself and what information is available to investors. So I can actually hop in and partially answer this and then pass it over to the prep team as well. The question for everyone is, are the company accounts available for viewing? What do investors get in return for the investment, and why are you going down the crowdfunding route? So for everyone on the webinar, if this is your first time to Birchal, obviously welcome. And if it's your second time, welcome back. But the way that these campaigns run and how it works through our platform is that with companies such as PREPD, we have two campaigns. So we have an expression of interest campaign, which we're in the thick of now. And then we have the actual offer campaign, which is where the offer document, which is basically a pared down prospectus, will be available for investors to view. And it will give you all the information you need to make a judgment call on whether you'd like to invest in this company, and information such as the pre-money valuation, the current cap table, the most recently completed 12 months of financial statements, which will include the 4 key financial statements, information on the company structure, key personnel, market opportunity, traction to date, use of funds, all the information you need to know about why they're raising capital now will be available in that offer document. So that information will be available to investors and people on the expression of interest list the day the offer goes live, and in some cases a draft can be sent around to investors a few days beforehand once we've done our final tick off. Under crowdsourced funding, so the way it works is that PREPD is a private company, and as many people probably on this webinar are aware, in Australia, in a private company there is a 50 non-employee shareholder cap rule. So it means they can only have up to 50 shareholders before they convert to a public company. But under crowdsourced funding, which is really interesting, private companies can actually have hundreds or thousands of investors on the cap table without having to convert to another structure, but they are registered as a crowdsourced funded company. So it's a really great way for really innovative and early stage, but also growth stage businesses to raise funds and bring along their community without necessarily having to undergo really onerous sort of compliance and reporting obligations. However, there is an annual report, there are shareholder updates, and a lot of companies really lean into that responsibility to keep everyone on board with how it works. But because it is a private company that people are investing into, it's not like investing into a company on the stock market. Your shares are considered quite illiquid. It is not necessarily that easy to buy and sell and trade your shares on a daily basis. And because of the rules around crowdsourced funding, information such on return on investments and exits, and you will make $5 million in 6 months' time, is considered to be speculative by ASIC, and we actually are not allowed to make these speculations on what the return on investment will be for these companies that come to the platform. So if you're looking through our prospectus and you're looking through to see these huge hockey stick projections and this, wow, it's going to be a $10 million company in 10 years' time, you won't find any of that information there, because under the ASIC regulations, we can't put anything out there unless it's got a reasonable basis. But in saying that, I am really interested to know from you, Andrew. Obviously, you have a long-term view of PREPD, and you can't guarantee anything. Nothing is set in stone except death and taxes, as my father likes to tell me. What is, broadly your vision for PREPD? Is it at some point in the future to pay dividends? Is it at some point to be acquired? Is it at some point to list? But with the caveat that none of this is guaranteed, but you must have a sort of a thought of where you'd like it to go.
Yeah, we most certainly do, Claire. And I think so great segue to that was the question around our IP. So we've got this IP that is rock solid for us to maximise or expose our product in the market that is different and unique, and forging what we call a subcategory in the hydration market until 2034. So we know, if we work backwards from there, if we were in a position that we had revenue of $40 to $50 million by 2028, 2029, and someone was to come along and acquire us at that point in time, they're going to have 5 or 6 years of exploiting that IP that they would then take over before it expired in 2034. And so therefore they would still get that first to market opportunity from that perspective. So that's certainly on the horizon for us, is to build this brand to a $40 to $50 million business in the next sort of 4 to 6 years, and then see where it goes from there in terms of acquisition of a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi, whoever. And then there was, in November last year, There's a brand in the US called Body Armor. They were bought out by Coca-Cola. They were valued at an $8 billion valuation at that point in time. So, you know, it's certainly it's the space that we do play in, that when bigger businesses want to buy smaller businesses out, they certainly do and do it well. So yeah, look, that's the plan. That's where we want to go, and hopefully, you know, the US market is a big key part to that.
But no guarantees. But good to know that's where the goal is.
That's a goal. It absolutely is. There's no guarantees. I mean, look, what I would say, and we've spoken to a lot of people over the last, you know, sort of 6 to 8 months, and most people are like, you've got a really good product because you've been able to survive the last 2 years where your route to market was to go to events, and they've basically been cancelled. You know, whilst we got to a handful, we probably got to more events in our first year than we did in our second and third year. And so to be able to be robust enough and have return customers and all those sorts of things to continually buy the product, ambassadors that stay on board and support and do their part of it as well, we think we've got a really strong foundation to be able to launch into the US and do the US market really well. And part of that Strava challenge, so in terms of strategy around the US, the idea of the Strava challenge was not to generate sales. It was to generate ideas of what market would appeal the most to our product, or who we appealed the most to. And so out of that Strava challenge, whilst we were across the 50 states of the US, the 3 states that stood out as liking PREP the most, or engaged with our socials the most, or completed the challenge and all those sorts of things, was California first, New York second, Texas third. So in terms of expansion, and let's say we raise the capital we want to raise out of this Birchal round, it just means that we're going to go and talk to 3 states of the states to start with, and leave the other 47 alone, maximize our Facebook spend, geo-target everything we do, and then expand from there.
And look, with a lot of companies in your position, you know, often they tend to go for a very exclusive sort of VC route, or they might go for a private or an angel investor route. I'm really interested to know, PREPD, you know, it's your second crowdfund, and why crowdfunding has been important to you. And maybe Tim as well, if you want to weigh in, what do you think of the crowdfund and going down this path for PREPD as an ambassador?
I mean, I think my area of expertise is not in this domain, so I wouldn't want to comment too much on what the best path is to gain capital. You know, I just, my main thing is this. I like the science, I like the product, and you know, the business side of things is not my area to really comment on.
Fair enough.
In terms of why crowdsource funding, look, Claire, when COVID hit in March 2020, the team and I said, well, we need to get in contact with our customer base. We'll see what they're at and what they're doing. And at that time, we had about 700 customers that had purchased once and once only. And so we thought, let's go and have a chat to those guys and just get some market intelligence. We got to speak to about half of those. And so about 350, and then half of those, so about 175, were like, we still love your product. We're just buying it at our local bike store or at events when we go to events and those sorts of things. So there's a couple of little bits that we learn out of that is people were predominantly, when they bought our product, they were buying it for game day, race day, those sorts of things. So we've tweaked our marketing around that to say that, you know, that's not what we ever envisaged. We envisaged that, yes, it would give you some advantage during game day, race day, but what we wanted you to do was be able to get more out of your training blocks, so that you can build a bigger base in training to have a better race, to coin Tim's phrase that he said to me one day. So that's why we decided to go to the crowd in the first place back then, was because we had so many passionate customers that were like, yeah, no, that's cool, we'd invest in that. And they did. So of our 300 odd investors from the first raise, about a third of them, or it was 40%, were actually customers that became investors. Wow. And so we just thought we'd come back to the crowd again and go again, because it was a really positive experience, and you turn, you know, customers into raving fans, I guess is what we wanted to do.
And what benefits will be offered to those investing in PREPD in this campaign? Are you planning to offer, obviously they get fully owned ordinary shares in the company, they become shareholders, that's a guarantee. But based on the level that people are investing at, will there be discounts or free products? And we've spoken a little bit about the dividends of return on investment, but are there any other benefits
Yeah, so the investor rewards this time around, we're going to go down the path of like a sports merchandise pack that'll include a little bit of product. It'll include a backpack. It'll include a hat, those sorts of things, just to really bring our brand alive and just have it out and about a little bit more. I mean, you see some of those other brands, True Protein do a fantastic job of that in terms of having merchandise for people to wear. And so we'll certainly go down that path.
Amazing. I'm very aware that we are in our final sort of 8-minute block of the webinar. So I'm just letting everyone know that I am trying to get through as many questions as I can. But if not, I've saved all the questions and I'll be sending them to Andrew and Tim after the webinar as well. So they will be able to get back to your question and maybe share it with the rest of those who signed up if you don't get to your question. So never fear, we've not forgotten you. There's a question that's come through about the current company structure. So do you see any changes to your company structure through this funding raise? Alongside this, obviously your product science is sound given the 20 years of study. However, what is the marketing strategy in order to sell the product? Because no offense, science is boring.
Look, it certainly sits, in terms of selling the product, it certainly sits around, ambassador endorsement is something that's really important to us, and we'll continue to build out those ambassadors in different markets. One of the things I've always said to Tim and Steve, who are our two ambassadors in the Ironman space, is, like we could probably have 10 or 15 ambassadors in the Ironman space, but we're just going to continue to talk to the same audience. And my conversations with these guys has been, well, until one of you want to leave, we'll just keep you two on because you're doing a fantastic job, but we'll build out other markets. So we'll look at netball, we'll look at, we'll try and find a high profile AFL footballer at some point in time if we can do that. Cricket's really tough because of their agreement. So ambassadors will play a huge role. Optimizing Facebook and Instagram advertising and all those sorts of things and continue to work down that space is really important. And then just other distribution channels. So the convenience store route that we've started in South Australia with on the run convenience stores, we'll look to do that through the Eastern Seaboard. So there's a number of things there, mindful of time. So the second part of that question is company structure. We don't see any change to the company structure at this point in time. The directors that are on board and they're keen to stay. So we'll keep it as it is.
Can I just add too that I think for athletes that genuinely care about performance, science, with all respect to Ben, I think science isn't boring, and that's what converts most of the people I know that drink Prepped. Is it's a huge factor. I give them the science and I say, well, do you want to absorb fluid, 30-odd% better? And the answer is pretty simple. But if you can get the science across in a simple and effective way, I do think it's good marketing, because when you're trying to break into that high performance, well, not even high performance, but improved performance world, the science is what Prep really has behind it compared to most other hydration products.
Yeah, it's a good point, Reedy. It is our main point of difference, is that unique science and the ability to use a product that no one else can get their hands on.
And look, actually from personal experience, so I have used Prepped in a half marathon before. And I am a classic case of how not to use it, which was barely drank before the race, tried to smash a prep before I did the race, did my race, which was great, and then conked out in the car. And when I was having a chat to Andrew afterwards, he's like, mate, you just stuffed it up. That's not how you use it. You should have used it in your training. You should have had a little water. And I should have got one of those jars, one of the bottles that's got a little like shaky thing in it.
And consumed it 12 to 18 hours before.
Yeah, all that, not 28 minutes before. I tried to mix it with a teaspoon. I really just like...
Perfect case, Claire. You're a great market case, and that's why we got the shakers and we've done it properly and we've rolled that out.
I'm a great nutcase, some would argue. But I think there's been some really good questions coming through that we won't have time to answer, which are based on your US expansion strategy. Are there going to be more products in the pipeline? Some fantastic information that I know will probably be included in that offer document when it's available. One thing that I think would be great off the back of this webinar is anyone who's attending, if you haven't yet had the product, go give it a red hot go before you invest in the business. If you haven't yet, if you choose to invest, not telling you to invest, but if you choose to invest, definitely have a go on the product. And I think maybe a really good question to land on before we talk about next steps is directed at Tim. And, if we're trying to get people in in this to go out and buy it and drink it and try it, can you comment on the mouth and the gut feel of the prepped product?
Yeah, so because it is a prebiotic and most prebiotics take a little bit of adaptation, which is why Andrew mentioned you should use it in training leading up to the race, which is also important from a marketing strategy because you don't want people just buying it for once a year for their race, and that's not how it works most beneficially. So I always recommend athletes a half dose to lead into in their training and then build up to a full dose. Or they can just take the Recover, which is a half dose, as a pre-drink formula. I haven't seen issues with people progressing it that way. I do think just going a full dose straight off the bat, you know, the night before your race is probably where you could face a little bit of not just loose bowels, those sort of symptoms. Certainly not severe GI distress or anything. But certainly it should be used on I think a half dose for a few days and then building up to a full dose. And it should really be used throughout the whole training block, not just on race day. Otherwise you're missing out on that consistent recovery, better sleep that it's supposed to provide and help on race day.
Yeah, not at 5 a.m. in the rain.
And to Tim's point there around some possible loose bowel action, all that is a good bacteria when they land in your gut. They go to war with the bad bacteria and they're just trying to take over and create a healthy microbiome for you. So once you've got that healthy microbiome, or you've got more good bacteria in your gut than bad bacteria, well, then the gut adaptation process happens, your stomach settles down and you're a healthier person and you're absorbing fluid more efficiently. So it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, fantastic. And just commenting on the mouthfeel for myself, I found it was sort of like it wasn't quite as thick as a smoothie, is how I found it. It was like, it definitely isn't like a Gatorade-y sort of just like sugary water drink. It's not as thick as a berry smoothie, but it's sort of that, it's almost like those, for me, you know, those yogurt pouches that you have and you knock them back, but not quite as thick as that. So if that helps anyone understand that the consistency of this product, which I think is actually quite nice on the race day, that's very much how it feels. For everyone joining, look, again, thank you so much for your time and your questions and your attendance. It's been a really fantastic turnout to today's session, and we have been recording it, so we will make this available for you to view afterwards. Wanting everyone to know that this is an open conversation and dialogue in these crowdsourced funding campaigns. So if you haven't yet expressed interest in the campaign, please do so on the Birchal platform via the PREPD profile. You'll see there's a message function on the PREPD profile. If you have any comments, feedback, questions, and you'd like to have a discussion with Andrew about the race before the offer goes live, I believe it's the week after next, please, reach out, have a chat. If you've got any feedback, we definitely love to hear it. But if you've expressed interest in this campaign, you will be the absolute first to know when the offer goes live. You'll be the first to know to receive the draft offer document if that's going to be sent around maybe a few days before the raise goes live. And if you have any questions at all about the Birchal process, if you want to invest as an individual, as a company, as a self-managed super fund, if you're having any questions about payments, you can just hit the chat bot on the Birchal website and it will be Jenny, our wonderful customer support coordinator, that will be answering, or she'll flick it to me and I'll get it in touch. So thank you so much again for everyone's attendance today. Tim and Andrew, again, to both of you for your expertise and your insight as well. And I might pass it to you both to sign off.
You go, ready?
No, it's great to be involved in, providing more information. And there is a overload of products out there, and I think it's just exciting, as I said, to be involved with a product that really is in a class of its own. And I think the US is the market for seeing PrEP really break through and go to a new level.
And I'd just echo what Tim said, but, the first crowdsourced funding we had a lot of fun. We have had a lot of engagement with the investors. I was at an event down on Glenelg Beach a couple of weeks ago, and one of the investors wandered up to our stand and said, "Hey, I invested last time. I'm thinking about doing it again." So just really appreciate the support for the brand. And, we are just a little Aussie startup, but we've had support from the South Australian government for a number of things. We've had support from the Birchal community, and we'd love to see that happen again and, take this product to the US and do something pretty cool.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to everyone attending. Thank you to you both. And looking forward to your offer going live. Thanks so much again. Bye.